Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Radical Collaboration. And one of the questions that I get asked often, and especially from people who know me, they can't believe I wrote a book. They can't understand how I got all of these opportunities from writing a book, the doors that have opened with this. And so they'll always ask me, well, how did you do it? Why'd you do it? What was the process? And I'm like, I've got a data point of one. Right? Let me introduce you to someone that knows this, sleeps this, has thousands of data points, right? And the whole idea behind radical collaboration here is the idea that people come to me and ask me questions. And I always think it's like when somebody comes, when I go to my dentist, right? If I went to my dentist and said, hey, could you do my knee surgery? Well, I love my dentist. She's awesome. She's hardworking. She could probably figure it out, but she serves me best by introducing me to the experts that she knows. And that's why I want to introduce you to the expert I know behind publishing, about getting your book out there and all it can do for you. My friend, Jim Howard. Jim, welcome.
Oh, thank you, Tom. It's great to be on here talking with you and your audience about something that I love, becoming an author and publishing and getting your message out there. And I don't think there's any stronger, better way to introduce yourself to a marketplace than with a book where you can really, enlighten someone else's life, share a journey, or just share information and knowledge that you have with other people. So it's exciting.
Well, and a little background here. So how do I know Jim? I know Jim through Morgan James Publishing. I'm thrilled. They invited me down to the red carpet event that they do for every author, right? They bring people down and they put them on the red carpet, and then they teach them after their book is out there. They give them the resources to actually use the book, understand the book, and leverage that book. And so they invite me to come down and talk about virtual book tours. But got to know Jim a lot and got to know his bride, Chris, and the whole team at Morgan James there. But I want to throw one thing out there. There's one thing I have learned is that if you are speaking, do not go after Jim Howard. When he starts talking, he sets the bar so high that all you can do is get up there and either go below the bar or just say, I agree with what Jim said, and try to expound on it. So with that, Jim, I had to throw that in there because you're going to raise the bar here. When people say, why should I write a book? How do you answer that? Because I think a lot of people say, I'd like to someday, but I don't think they realize the power behind it. I know I didn't understand, because if I would have, it would have been come out a whole lot sooner.
Well, sometimes the honest answer to that question, and maybe the first answer, is sometimes maybe you shouldn't write a book. But honestly, here's the thing with writing a book, it's a big process, and I think you have to go into it thinking of it in that way, because a book has the power to either set you up for success or really open up pull back some curtains and reveal some things that you may not want revealed. So I think when you ask that question, should I write a book, or why should I write a book, or is writing a book right for me? I think you've got to ask a couple of things. Number one, what are your goals, right? What are you wanting to accomplish from writing a book? Are you just writing the book because someone said, hey, writing a book is a great idea and it'll position you as an expert? That's true. But is that a reason really that you should write that book? And I think that you've got to really look at what you're doing. Is your message strong? Do you believe in it enough to support it for a long time? Are you going to build something from that message? And if those answers are yes, and if you have that inclination, then the answer is yes, you should write a book. Because when you write a book, you're instantly elevated in perception. And we, think about it today in society, we live a lot based on perception, whether it's in media or news or stories that we see, or when we introduce ourselves to a client or introduce ourselves to a space, it's in perception. You talked about the red carpet events that we put together with Morgan James. And those events are, as you said, they're meant to bring our authors in one place that we can celebrate them and we can launch their books, but then we can educate them. Now, here's the interesting thing, and this will circle back around to the question, but when we have you, for instance, Tom Schwab, come and talk about the power of being interviewed on podcasts and what that power can do for an author to get their message out there as they share. Most of our authors may not know who you are. They may never have heard of Interview Valet or Tom Schwab. And when we introduce you, all of a sudden the perception is, well, if Jim or if David say this is a person that we need to listen to, their perception immediately goes to that this is a person we need to listen to. And a book will do the same thing. Because you become an author, you know the topic well enough to write a book on the subject. And that sounds a little cliche, right? But it's true. So when you put a book out, the perception is immediately that you're the expert. You're the authority in whatever space that you're in because you've written this book. And here's why I say maybe you should question that, whether it's right for you or whether you want to do it. Because I think too many times what happens today is we see business owners, entrepreneurs, people who have been told that they need to elevate their game, and they just write a book. But sometimes the way they go about it, how they put that book together, may not be the best information in the world. They're not taking the time to really investigate what they want to say or put the details in that they need to share their information in the way they need to. And the book is poorly written. So if you're going to take this on, becoming an author, I think the first question you ask is, why should I write the book? And you need to answer those questions. What does it do for me? What am I going to do because of it? And am I going to step into that new space and own it? And then once you determine, yes, I want to write that book, then the next question really needs to be, how do I write a great book? Because there's this great scene in The Wizard of Oz. And I know we've all seen that movie, right? But The Wizard of Oz, we have this wizard who controls the land of Oz, and he does it with perception, right? He's got this big image and his big booming voice, and fire flies from his throne when he speaks. And he's ruling with fear, but he's ruling with this gigantic, presentation until something happens, until a small dog runs up to the front of the room and pulls back a curtain and reveals a bumbling old salesman that just happened to fly in at the right time with the right bottle of elixir and set himself up in a position of control. So when that curtain's pulled back, reality's revealed. And when you write a book and someone reads that book, now they have the reality and they can judge you based on that information. They can judge you based on what you're saying. So it gives you the opportunity to build a platform that can launch a career, but it also gives you an opportunity to really fall flat on your face if you're not doing it in the right way. And I think that for me, the better question is, if you're going to write a book, are you going to do it in the way that's going to set you up for success?
And Jim, I love that. And I love your heart in this, because so many people, right? If you're selling books, hey, everybody should write a book. It's like the people that said, everybody should have a podcast. Everybody should be a podcast guest. It's like, no, it's like, it could be an embarrassment. What's the why? What's the reason? And I love how you and Morgan James as a company help people think through that. Not only what's the goal of it, what's this going to do, but also when to do it. Because I remember talking with a friend of mine earlier this year, and he said, here are my 4 big projects for the year. And he put them in order, and the book was the last one. And I'm like, well, don't all the other ones sort of build off of that? And he sort of looked at that and said, oh yeah, that was that foundational piece there that went up there. And the other thing too is that what you have taught me is that that it's not just a one-time thing. You can build that entire platform from it. And I can think of, you guys have helped me open doors with speaking, right? Some from the standpoint of, I remember early on asking a big event, what does it take to get on your stage? And the person was very, very clear with it. He's like, either you've got to be a celebrity with lots and lots of followers that'll bring tickets, right? Or you've got to written a book. And I'm like, I've looked at my face. I own a mirror, and I'm like, I'm not going to be a celebrity. And so I asked him, like, why? Why is a book important? Because he said, that way I know that you can communicate it, that you've thought it through. And I didn't appreciate that until I went through it and actually having to write it all out and make it clear and a format to it. To me, that was so important in the other things that I did with that. So to me, it's not just, like you said, just writing the book, but what's the plan behind that?
Yeah. What's the purpose? I mean, and that's the whole crux of it, is that you got to know what you're doing going in, and the why, because the why will get you to the how, the why will get you to the where. But not knowing that, you could, we see authors all the time, and I wish I could tell you that every author we publish, and we publish about 200 authors a year on average, but I wish I could tell you that every author comes in and supports the book, long term. But in reality, we have a handful every year that have just written the book because of what it's supposed to do. So they write the book, we get to the end of the publishing process, and they're like, okay, I'm on to the next thing. Well, the next thing should be, how are you going to build around what you've put out, right? How are you going to build the follow-up from the book? How are you going to build the products, the coaching? How are you going to build the speaking? How are you going to let the book do what it can do? The great thing when you write a book is you get this new name, and you're no longer Tom Schwab. You're now Tom Schwab, author of, and that puts you into a whole different category. I talk to people all the time, and I tell them, I say, if you want to see this in reality, just watch the news, right? Because you always see, whenever there's a news story, sometimes you'll see quotes put up, and it'll say one blogger said this, or another blogger said this. But then in studio, we have with us today so-and-so, and he or she is the author of. See, the author gets the FaceTime. The author gets in the door. The author is the one that gets to present his case live. And that's because of what you just said. You've taken the time to do the research, to put the effort in, to write a great book. And now you're supporting that book, and people are seeing it, and people are getting that information. So therefore, you're on a different platform. And that happens across the board. It doesn't matter if you're in a medical field. It doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur in the entrepreneurial space, if you're in a coaching space. No matter what you're doing, when you write the book, you're instantly elevated. And there are tons of events that want to have you in if they can say you're the author of, because it's that little added credibility that takes it beyond even them saying you're great to your book says you're great. So it's a powerful, powerful tool.
Well, and I had the book in my mind for a long, long time. And my bride jokes that if babies were as overdue as my book, the world would be in an awful place. Yeah. And the other thing too is that, it seems very intimidating, right? The first time you write a book, and it's a process and everything like that. And the idea of, just going away to a cabin and I'm going to write this book and in solitude and everything like that. I think that's what I had in my mind. When I have time and there's no distractions, then I'll do this. And it really wasn't until I got people around me that said, yeah, it's been done. Here's other people seeing it. And your encouragement that it really became a reality. So can you talk a little bit about that, about, as a publisher, you're not just printing the book, you're really helping through all of those things and really a partner in it, and maybe even well, I'll take this for a follow on here.
Awesome. So, when you write a book, it can be a daunting process, right? But you're right. It's been done before. And there are so many different ways that you can look at how to write a book. The big thing is start with an outline. Keep it simple. Don't make it harder than it is. I work with authors who have a lot of different ways that they like to communicate. And if you think about it, we all communicate in different styles. Podcasters love to orate. They love to sit in front of a microphone and talk. So guess what? You can talk your book out. If you have a clear outline, you can sit and really just verbalize your book, have that recorded, transcribe it, and edit it, and you can bring all the content out. If you're comfortable with video, some people do better in front of a camera. Do it. Set up the camera. Go through the process. Teach what you want to teach. Get the information out. Some people like to be interviewed. I have a process, and my wife and I have been doing for years when we work with authors who have a hard time sharing their thoughts in deep enough formats to get all the content out, where we'll actually help them build an outline, and then we'll turn the outline into a questionnaire form. And then I jump on an interview just like what we're doing, and we talk, and I'll ask them questions and they'll answer, and then I'll go deeper and they'll answer. And if I'm clear, we move on. If I'm not clear, I'll ask another follow-up until we get everything that I need to be clear. And then we'll transcribe that and record it. Some people want to bang it out on a typewriter, and that is awesome. You can still do that if you have that time. The big thing is to put it on a schedule, right? No matter how you're going to write, start with a schedule, get the outline put together, and just devote a certain amount of time every week or every day or every month. There's no rules on how long it should take to write a book, or no rules on how long it shouldn't take. Really, it's up to you. So you know your schedule better than anyone. You know your capacity and what you can add into your plate. So just do it accordingly. What you'll find once you get into the process, you're going to put more time in, then you're going to put more time in, then you're going to put more time in, and eventually it's going to be done. And when you're finished, you're going to say, wow, that wasn't as hard as I made it out to be. But get good coaching, know your topic, know what you want to share, start with an outline, and then just sit and look at how you communicate best and deliver your message.
That's how I did it. I had the outline and I dictated it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I've written a lot of blogs in my life, and every one of them felt like a homework assignment. Right. But I can talk. And so to dictate that and get that and then transcribe it, for me, it was setting a deadline. I can still remember mutual friend, Nick Pavlidis. He was there and he kept saying, when's your book going to be done? When's your book going to be done? And it was sometime in like the summer. I said, I will have the first draft done before I celebrate Christmas. And my bride was there at the same time. And like they're standing next to each other going, yeah. And all of a sudden, as the leaves started to drop and it started to turn cold, I'm like, I've got a deadline here. Yeah. And I can still remember sharing with him the first draft. And it was Christmas Eve, like right around noon. And I'm like, I'm not proud of this. It's not my best work, but here's the first draft, and shared that with them. And so to me, just having that deadline was important. Mm-hmm. And what I didn't want to give you like 3 questions all at the same time, but I know a lot of people know authors that have had bad experiences. Mm-hmm. And I can think of one friend of mine who shall remain nameless. He wrote a book for the Dummy series, right? The Dummy's Guide for This. And he had to buy whatever it was, like 20,000 copies, something like that. His garage was filled with it. He moved from Texas to Nashville, Tennessee. And he always tells this story of the movers were moving these boxes one after the other. And the guy that was moving it said, what's in these boxes? He opened it up and he gave him a copy of it. And he says, I wrote this book. And the mover looked at it and goes, did you sell any of these books? And to him, it was just like an embarrassment. And he was so he had a bad experience with a publisher and getting his first book out there. And fortunately or unfortunately, he shared that experience with everybody and probably scared a lot of people away. And I always thought of that when I heard about the Morgan James business model. It's like, wow, that's different than anything I've ever heard of. Can you unpack that a little bit on how the business model is different?
Yeah, as much as I can, right? Because it's one of those things, we're innovators. And I just had this conversation the other day about innovation. And we're not innovators to change for the sake of changing, right? We're innovators because when we stepped into this, the industry was broken for authors, and we wanted to change that. And the quick story behind the company is that David Hancock, the owner and CEO, he wrote a book. He didn't know it was a hard thing to do. He was told you should write a book, and he wrote a book. He got picked up by a big publisher, traditional publisher, and again, didn't know that most people struggle with that. It just happened for him, and it worked. the book sold well. He was able to quit his day job. He was able to raise his rates. He was able to step into a different level of authority because of the book, and everything that he had hoped it would do, it did. But he hated the process because of exactly what you said. The owner took, first of all, the publisher took ownership of the content, so they owned the copyright, which means they edited it. The book, they changed some content, they added things that David didn't say, and they took some things out that he did say. So it wasn't his, and he had no say in the creation process, none of that. So he hated the experience. The second time he wrote a book, he said, well, I'm going to do it different. I'm a successful author, so I'm going to self-publish it. And he did, and he loved the process because he got everything he wanted. He got the cover he wanted, he got the book the way he wanted, it said what it wanted to say. He owned the content. Except when he got to the end, nobody cared because he didn't have the power of the publisher to distribute the book. So again, he ended up just like your friend with a garage full of books and no one to give them to. So he knew there had to be a different way. And that's where Morgan James came in. The idea of blending the two worlds. So there would be a space for authors who wanted to have control, who wanted to have say in what things looked like and felt like, but they had the support of a publishing company that understood what they wanted to do with the book and understood how to support them in that. So our model is a little bit different. We bring our authors in. First of all, we don't publish every book that comes to us. We get about 3,000 to 7,000 submissions every year. That's been pretty steady. And out of those, like I mentioned earlier, we do about 200 books. So we actually go through a process of accepting books. And those books for us are accepted on merit of book. It's got to be a great topic. It's got to be a strong, well-written book. And then third, there has to be a reason for it to exist for the author. So there has to be an audience for it. It's got to be a good book, good topic. But then the author has to show us that I'm going to use the books to leverage my coaching or further my conversations with these readers. There has to be a reason for it to exist for us to get excited about it. And we don't ask our authors to buy a garage full of books. That has never been something that we've wanted to do. We do ask that they commit to buying a small quantity, 2,500 copies in some cases, over the life of the agreement. And we don't care if they do that a case at a time, a few books at a time, or all at one time. That's up to the author. So we don't force that on them. But it just gives us the confidence that our author believes that they can move 2,500 copies of their own book, or at least they're going to try, which means they're going to put effort into it. And that's all we ask. So outside of that, we come in and we will help. We'll sit down together, which many publishers don't do. With every author we publish, we sit down with them. We have a team put together with David, myself, their operations manager. Everyone involved is going to sit down and we're going to talk about the creation. So our authors get say in what their book's going to look like and feel like, and what size and what's the page count, what's the right price point. And we're going to guide them. We're going to use their experience and their expertise to really get them to understand how we should be thinking for the industry. But we're going to rely on them to tell us, how does that match up with your brand? How does that match up with your message? Are you going to be so confident when you see this book that you can't wait to hand it to somebody else? So they get some say, and then we go to work. We put the book together, and then we are a traditional trade publisher, which means we've got distribution partners that are going to represent the books to all the major chains, all the independents, all the online stores, as well as airports, as well as libraries. Internationally, with teams in Australia, UK, across India and down into Asia, and then with foreign rights if necessary, if we need to get partnership with foreign publishers to translate it into their language and use their channels to get a greater distribution even beyond what our normal reach would be. So we really partner with our authors, and then along the way, we're going to educate our authors. We always stay in touch with our authors on how to make the best of their book, how to get the biggest bang out of their book, how to leverage what we're doing through their social networks so they can keep their audiences aware of what's happening with the book, and then how to better build their business beyond the book is what I like to call it. Not behind the book, beyond the book, because the book's going to come out, it's going to sit on a shelf, people are going to read it, but there needs to be more for that reader to come into and get involved in. So we go through all of that with our authors as well.
Yeah, and what's ordinary to you is amazing to other people. And I didn't realize how amazing it was until we started to do work with other publishers and, well, other authors, I should say. So we do a whole lot of podcast book tours, getting your message out there. And it was always interesting to work with some people that have different publishers. And I can think of some that would say, "Oh, let me send you the case of books to send to the podcasters because I've got so many cases of them." Yeah. Other ones would just say, "Well, just buy it from Amazon because you can get it cheaper from Amazon than I can buy it myself." And I'm like, "You're kidding me." And there was one that, a big publisher that shall remain nameless, but is based in Boston and associated with a great university. And it's like, oh my gosh, you can't send a PDF of that without paying full price on it.
Yeah.
And it struck me because there was something that I heard at the Morgan James event, the red carpet event there, where somebody said, it's not about the number of books you sell. It's about the number of ideas that you get out there. And for some people, if it's Stephen King, he doesn't maybe have a back end to it, right? He makes his money from the books. But for most of us, we're building a business. We're, building a coaching practice, doing something there. And I've always loved how supportive you guys are of your authors, drop shipping, doing creative things like that. You always come across as more of a partner than a vendor, or like you even said, I can't imagine writing a book and then signing over. And you can put whatever you want in my book under my name.
We've had authors come to us and say, hey, I wanted to do an event, and I reached out to my publisher, and all I wanted was a few hundred books to the event to support the people in the room. And what they got back was a cease and desist, that they couldn't even do the event because it wasn't what the publisher thought was conducive to book sales. So because of that, they had to even shut down their own event because the content wasn't owned by them. It was owned by the publisher. So you really have to find a publisher. When you publish your book, you want to look at all the fine print, make sure you have the rights that you need. Make sure, Tom, you brought up a great point with book purchases. Some publishers work on different models. Some will do it off of retail. Some will do it a percentage off of retail. For us, we go to print costs. We wanted to make it as easy as possible for our authors. So it's a small percentage above the actual print cost. So they're going to pay better prices from us than even if they try to print it themselves. But the point is, an author should never, ever work for their publisher. If you find out you have to work for your publisher, you're with the wrong publisher. The publisher should be doing everything in its power to support you and your message, because that's how we sell more books. We sell more books because our authors are building a bigger audience, because our authors are extending their message, because our authors are getting their audiences excited, which we know will translate to buying books. So we're comfortable with that, but we want our authors to be as successful as possible, because with us, we truly believe that our success is their success. And as the more successful they're going to be in their business and their coaching and building their audiences, the more successful we're going to be as a publisher.
Well, and I think the true testament to that is when I go to the red carpet events there and you see how many people have published a book with another publisher and then went with you, and then see the number of people that wrote a book and then their second or their follow-on book is done through Morgan James. And it's not because you've got, a contract with them and, got them signed into that, but they liked the experience so much. And, I guess that's how all of us build the businesses, right? At Interview Valet, we get 70% of our clients through referrals because people like the experience. They tell other people about it. And, people say that's not scalable. Maybe not for Amazon or Google, but for you and I, Jim, I don't think there's any better way to build a business.
That's right. We always say we want to earn the right to publish your next book. And that just means we want to do a good enough job that you would never think of having anyone else do the work for you. And that's what we strive to do. You're right, Tom. We always strive. And here's the thing: we're confident enough in our relationships and confident enough in our outcomes. We've had authors who have launched with us, hit the New York Times, and all of a sudden the big boys come running. And they want to throw money at them and say, "We want your next books," and they lock them into 2 and 3 book deals. But usually, I can tell you, we've had almost. I can't say almost all, but a big percentage of those authors who have left to go on to sign those big contracts, once they fulfilled those 2 or 3 books that they needed to fulfill, they come back and say, "You know what? We don't want that hassle. The money's not worth it. We want to come home." And our arms are always open to them. I mean, that's the thing. We want to be whatever we need to be to make our authors successful. And if that means moving on to a bigger publisher, congratulations. Go knock it out, rock star. And if it's coming back to us and doing some more with us, let's do it. We're always here.
Well, Jim, what's ordinary to you is amazing to other people. Thank you so much for, taking the time so I can introduce you as, one of my great go-to resources. The one thing I would like to ask, okay, so somebody's listening to this right now and they're like, yeah, I want to get a book done. I was hoping to do it during the last lockdown, I'll get to it. What's the one thing that you would say to them?
Nike said it best. Just do it. If you want to write a book, then you have to write the book. If you've got a message, and I can tell you right now, we all have a message. We all have been through something. We've accomplished something. We've survived something. We've done something. And guess what? We're not the only ones to go through it, which means there are other people that are going through similar, that have struggled with similar. And if we have the answers, if we have the path that we got to where we are through it, then we should share that. So we all have a message. And I think that everyone listening to this or who will listen to this and has ever thought, maybe I should write a book. If you're asking that, you should investigate it. Look at your time schedules, set the time, get your message clear, write the book, and then do the research on how to get that book out to the world. Because there's a world that needs it, especially in these pandemic situations like we're in now. Anytime that we see a crisis, and we've seen it pretty consistent throughout financial falls, throughout health scares, throughout transitions in politics, it doesn't matter. Whenever we go through something as a nation or as a world, people start looking for information. They start looking for information. So we see a need for authors. We see a need for people to share their stories and share their journeys. And that might be you. You may have that message that someone else needs to hear. And if one person reads a book or reads something that you've done and their life has changed for the better, then the entire journey was worth it.
Well, Jim, thank you so much. What's ordinary to you is amazing to others. I appreciate you. And my bride was just asking me last night, hey, what's your next book coming out? So maybe maybe we'll be talking again about something like that.
We should talk.
All right. Thank you so much, buddy. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Tom.
Bye, everybody.